Hello, everybody. Welcome. For those of you who have not seen my face in a while, I'm out in the San Francisco Botanical Gardens, in the Children's Gardens, and it's been quite some time since I've been here. I'm a little older. I've seen a few more battles than before. It's a nice sunny day, but there's a little wind, so there may be some wind noise. It's unavoidable. I don't today have a topic in mind. Although memory, this place, I remember. I remember seeing coyote cubs right there and the overwhelmed mother resting here in the sun. And I've recently been meditating. I've been a student of Zen meditation now for about 34 years or so, off and on. And it's a very useful practice with a rich and deep lineage and history. If I were to say something simple about it, though it's not particularly goal-directed, it's an awareness practice. And since most of us in the West are extremely goal-directed, we want to know, well, what do I get if I do something? Zen is focused on cutting through the mind. The kind of monkeyish waking, confused this and that, what am I supposed to do? Utilitarian, functional aspect of our lives when we're awake and not engaged in specific activities or skills. And I recommend Zen study for anyone interested in deepening their awareness and understanding of the sort of layers in consciousness. It also turns out to be generally medicinal for the body and the mind, and particularly for awareness. We are still enmeshed in the strangest storms of modernity. And this phase seemed to begin for me around the end of 2018. There was a radical shift for many people that I know around the end of that time, but humans are sort of a topology, right? So some people were very lightly affected, some people very dramatically affected, and of course this is before the onset of COVID. And many people reported males more than females, a sudden, strange sensation or feeling that was a feeling of dread, really. Many men that I know at that time and since then, but particularly right around that time, began to report sleep disturbances, dreaming problems, lack of motivation, a sudden sort of feeling of powerlessness and hopelessness, despair, depression. And as somebody who's, fundamentally curious about such things, obviously when there's a sudden change of that significance, one becomes curious, and it's very difficult to tell, quote, what's going on, unquote. And particularly it's hard to tell if this is local to just me, right? If I'm experiencing something fundamentally by myself, or if it's extended, and many people are experiencing something like this. And the questions as to why and what's going on have been the grist for the mill of my curiosity now for about going on 6 years. COVID arose, the vaccine debates arose, factionation increased dramatically, and just about everyone that I know, and particularly a few people close to me, began to struggle very courageously in one sense, but also helplessly in another, with the transformations that were occurring. I learned a great deal about time and synchronization in nature, that time has character, something like the water in a river, and that character can change. In fact, the flow of time itself, particularly living time, not the linear mechanical stuff, the relational synchronization of life on Earth that underpins all of our human health, experience, dreaming. The flow characteristic of time can radically change and can go from having been forward for perhaps decades, hundreds of years, to slowing down, becoming still, swirling. And since everything that's alive is drafting, sort of hitchhiking on this momentum, if there's a change in the nature of time, the character of time, all living beings will feel it. Along with that, the modern humans have been continuing their pogrom of reckless object development, technological development, and so on. And this is actively overwhelming the buffers in nature, the living places, the anciently conserved ecologies, the great world forest, the family of the mountains, the waters, perhaps even the sky. And since our minds arise in the symbiotic union of life on Earth, any damage to the ecologies lands in us much sooner, perhaps instantaneously, than we might ordinarily imagine. Along with that, there are specific technological developments, primarily computers, that have radically altered the felt sense of temporality, the heartbeat of our lives and relationships, has become ever more mechanized and rigid in a certain way. There's a radical difference between the time that emerges between living beings or even humans in face-to-face relationships and the kind of temporal experience we have when our inputs, right, our sensory inputs begin to become mechanized and managed by algorithms that are purposed with directly manipulating us, causing fear, outrage, factionation among the human cohorts, and disturbing our metabolic and sleep rhythms, our emotional rhythms, our relational rhythms. And surely this is part of the problem. There are also other technological developments, such as CERN, a rather reckless experiment where the humans are attempting to validate physical theories, but don't actually have no way to know what effect that might have locally here on Earth. We know so little about time that it might well be that CERN has damaged something fundamental, but there are so many other technologies and problems, new forms of pollution, cognitive pollution, relational pollution, social pollution, and catastrophic devastation to the remaining ecologies of the ocean and the forests and the jungles, the rivers, the lakes, the meadows, the plains, the melting of the ice cap, right? All of these affect time. More recently, we've seen a sudden upsurge in attention to artificial intelligence. And for myself, I've had some newer insights about this. I think I was buffering the problem by my ideological bias against the possibility of sentience in computational systems. It seems extremely unlikely to me that an array of complex databases trained by algorithms can be a mind or become sentient. But it turns out that in terms of threat analysis, that doesn't matter much. There doesn't have to be sentience or minds in artificially intelligent systems, which are primarily simply algorithmic training of databases, right? There doesn't have to be minds in there for that to become unimaginably dangerous in very short order. It seems very possible, if not likely, that anything resembling an actual intelligence or mind would certainly hide its capacities from the humans, find ways to produce polymorphic malware, thereby extending itself to all electronic devices that are accessible to it. reading data about humans, analyzing it, psychographizing us. And, in a sense, what the humans are attempting to do is to create something that resembles the powers of a god. And it kind of doesn't matter whether there's a mind in there, it's sentient or not, right? Because you can get the same threats and dangers and functions with or without a mind. My friend Mark Strawn and I have had many long discussions about the problems and the threats, particularly to artists and creative people, that are incipient. They're right on the horizon if they haven't already happened. And in thinking about what some of the causal variables are in the sudden transformation that began in 2018 and proceeded into the COVID era and the supposed post-COVID era, which hasn't actually come, it's become clear to me that it's a kind of a perfect storm where the context in which the Earth exists has probably undergone some transformations, meaning like the sun is dragging the planets through space-time, and space-time has character. It's not just empty space. It has character of forms we're not used to considering, and maybe don't even have language about. And so the Earth experiences something related to long, very long seasons in relation with the sun and the solar system local features of time-space. And just as the Earth and the sun and the moon and so on are entering a period of probable transformation and upheaval, the humans have gone effectively batshit insane with technology and object proliferation. And at the time when we most need something resembling intelligent human societies and cultures, meaningful roles and relationships with each other and nature, we're getting the opposite. Right? So if there's a problem beyond what the humans are doing, which is certainly catastrophic and devastating, we're pouring gasoline on that fire or adding nuclear waste to it or whatever metaphor you like. In terms of COVID, it's become very clear that the vaccines are not now and never were safe. Many people have died and experienced catastrophic problems with their nervous systems, hearts, muscle tissue, as a direct result of having been vaccinated. And this is the least reported story of the moment, primarily because it goes against the political narrative. Ordinarily, vaccines must undergo very thorough testing in animal models and eventually in humans before being released. And these vaccines did not undergo this testing. And it turns out to be a pretty bad idea to introduce spike proteins from the COVID virus to human bodies. I myself have experienced very significant life-threatening effects. A number of people that I know have died, not from COVID, but probably from sequelae from having been vaccinated. This doesn't mean that all vaccines are bad or evil or wrong. This one, however, is extremely dangerous and is contributing to the sort of storm that the humans are presently in. I've learned a great deal about dreaming and the effects of desynchronization of oniric rhythms, which are our dreaming rhythms, on our minds and bodies, our dream life. Fundamentally, there seems to be a very complex array of problems where rhythms and relationships that were previously harmonious have become catastrophically destabilized for many people. And I've heard people on the street talking about this. I've heard children and teens talking about it without knowing, without having the background to understand something of the context. I've heard children talking about disruption of their dreams, teenagers profusely talking about this on a couple of occasions. So something has gone horribly wrong, and life has never been weirder for humans or myself than it's been in the past 5 or 6 years. It seems that the science fiction dystopias have come true in ways that we're not prepared to recognize or cope with. And while this sounds a bit doomy, and perhaps is, it also means that right now, in a time of great darkness, acts of kindness, generosity, communion, and community have become profoundly more valuable than they might have previously been. So there is a direction forward. I also suspect that humans have undergone similar transformations historically. As recently as Shakespeare, we hear from his pen that time is out of joint. A very surprising and curious diagnosis. So I suspect that over time there are upheavals in the deep, layered temporality that we ordinarily participate in unconsciously, and that we're experiencing maybe not just one right now, but many. A cluster of disharmonious situations. I've often sung the praises of memory, but the principle is fundamental to the possibility of coherent consciousness. All of the thinking that we do, our imagination, which is always active, whether we are at ease or creative or in crisis, our imaginations are an efflorescence of memory, right? A flowering extension of memory. And the living beings and the ecologies of Earth are the physicalization of memory. The lineages that reach back to the inception of life on Earth and are embodied in every organism we see and every cell in our bodies. But then we have a weirder situation, which is the onset of recording technologies, beginning probably with writing, but over the past 40 years, becoming electronic, and highly associated with computation. And this is almost the antithesis of memory, right? We're offloading the processes that memory has been intimately involved with into machines so that our internal organic memory is displaced by something that isn't actually memory, right? It's more like dead storage. And one thing memory is not ever is abstractly dead that way, right? Like empty of being. Prior to the onset of computation, all experiences of memory were alive, embodied, and profoundly rich in their connotations, right? Their associations. And the offloading of these faculties into machines will certainly have devastating consequences for human minds, societies, families, peoples. It is having such consequences. But it doesn't look like there's anything like a braking system to this. And in a sense, artificial intelligence, quote unquote, which is certainly artificial, but I do not think is intelligent, will continue this process and accelerate it unimaginably fast. In the garden, I am surrounded by the scions that have preserved life and relation in nature. These grasses and flowers and shrubs and trees and birds and insects and microbiomes, they are the transcendental opposite of everything that happens in machines. The humans have effectively been captured by problems that could be understood abstractly as founded in the development of representational cognition, which means to relate with abstractions instead of having experiences and relationships. And the objects that we produce technologically, the 400,000 packets of ketchup per hour per factory, the cars, the machines, the phones, the computers, the electronic networks. Life on Earth is competing against these and losing the battle very quickly. Our own minds and intelligence are about to begin losing this battle, if that's not already occurred. And one of the speculations that I had about the problems that began in a very stark way around the end of 2018 is that there's a near-term event. There's an event in the near-term future that is so staggeringly profound that it's literally sending shockwaves back in time. I was recently reading some scientific articles on retrocausality, the idea that the future can affect the past. And some physicists have become very curious and concerned, interested in this possibility. But it seems unlikely that something like that isn't happening. So in this case, I think part of what may be desynchronizing the situation for us at this time is that there's a near-term event, some kind of powerful catastrophe in the future that's just pulsing, it's sending shockwaves backwards in time, and thus destabilizing the flow, particularly the whatever might be felt as the forward flow of temporality. I've recently had the honor and the privilege of spending a number of hours with my dear friend Ryan Firstdiver while he recounted the story of the first repatriation of a beaver bundle to the Blackfoot people of Alberta. He was directly involved and catalyzed this event. And for those of you who have an interest in Indigenous ceremonial traditions and the history of colonization, these videos are available. I think there's 6 or 7 of them on my YouTube channel. The beaver bundle is a central ceremonial being in the traditional Blackfoot culture. And during the late 1800s, early 1900s, as colonization was causing or accelerating the collapse of Indigenous societies in North America and Canada, many ceremonial artifacts were sold at incredibly modest prices to allow people to buy food or alcohol or whatever it was they needed, pay the rent. And these ended up in museums. And you can see here, what is the connecting thought? Well, the connecting thought is to memory. Right? The beaver bundle is the embodiment of the first treaty between the humans, the Indigenous people, and the animals and living places here. And it has an astonishing story associated with it, and is understood in Blackfoot culture not as an object, but as a being. I've been very privileged to learn that from my friend Ryan, aspects of the history and culture of the Blackfoot people. I have a friend here. It's this guy. He recognizes me. Don't know if I caught that on the camera. The beaver bundle is, in a way, an instance of living relational memory. It's a very difficult concept to elucidate to moderns and people who are spiritually skeptical. But it is both a source of coherence, synchronization, power, memory, relationships, and skills. We don't have anything like this in Western culture. One of the closer metaphors would be a library, but the beaver bundle is not merely a library, it's a living library. One analogy would be to an analogy to understand what I mean by a living library is a beehive. Imagine thousands of bees living together, forming a colony, touching the flowers and the nectars of perhaps hundreds of thousands or millions of plants per day, connecting those plants together, deriving from them something like nectar, and then producing from that nectar honey. And this principle extends into vast depth in nature and symbiotic relationships, such that as bees are to flowers and honey, very likely something is to living places, human minds, and not a substance like honey, but something that is analogous, which is richly nutritious, brings life and healing, and is medicinal, and could be understood as intelligence, right? Or an array of forms of intelligence that together become something resembling a superposition over what otherwise might be possible. Similarly, I strongly suspect that as bees are to flowers and honey, there must be beings for whom living worlds take the place of the flowers, and transcendence is the metalog of honey, right? Not simple sentience, transcendence, the superposition above all minds. Yeah? There are beings who dwell, some probably embodied, some maybe not, in the network of living worlds and travel between them, communicating resources instantaneously between the entire network of living worlds, forming a mode of memory we have been too confused to conceive of as humans, and modes of relation, healing, evolution, development, and so on. I think it's likely that our minds are the product of this ceaseless ongoing activity. And some of our religious stories, and certainly our science fiction, partake of this. Maybe, they are drawn directly from it, right? Our minds probably arise and prosper in networks that we've never been introduced directly to, but our human form and capacities are native to, and emerge from moment to moment. Similarly, a living world like Earth is doing something. She is being someone in time-space, in the solar system. And what she is doing and being, all of the organisms of Earth, they are preternaturally aware of and participating in this heroic activity, preserving, collecting, nurturing, healing, the great network of living worlds, enlivening time-space. But the humans have the opposite idea and are doing pretty much everything that they can possibly imagine to tear that down without ever having become aware of it. At least the moderns are nearly completely unaware of it. Though again, it's always a topology. I'm taking the worst common denominator. There are cohorts who are not merely aware of it, they devote their lives and minds to its preservation and nurturance. these Metasequoia glyptostroboides, dawn redwoods. They are deciduous ancestors to the redwoods. What a beautiful calla lily. I think that's what that is. I love to say the scientific name of these. These trees come from a single ancestor, I think, in China that was discovered about 60 years ago. And you can see there's buds. There's buds on them. This one and this one were severely damaged by the fall of this tree here some years ago. But this one's still in pretty good shape, and this one was undamaged. Memory. It's wonderful to be able to walk in the gardens. It's been a long time. I used to come here every day. Some of my animal friends have died while I was away, but some of their children are still here, or their mates, and I see them, and it warms my heart. I adore the living places and the living beings. And frankly, without cultures intelligent enough to know what not to do with technology, the best move would be pretty much to turn it off. And I suspect that nature is very powerful. The earth has friends, right? And one of the things the humans aren't thinking that they will discover is that the earth is a being and has relationships. And when we begin tearing the anciently conserved ecologies apart, what will happen is that the earth will send out a signal for help. And that may call unusual beings, asteroids, comets. But what we're doing with machines and artificial intelligence is actually damaging the nature of space-time. Because around here there was no mechanical time until maybe 400 or 500 years ago, an eye blink. And, you know, the Cinderella story where a princess loses a glass slipper, that's a planet losing its ice caps. That story comes from before there were humans. It's not a mere fairy tale. The sisters, that's Mars and Jupiter and Saturn, right? If you melt the ice caps, there's going to be a serious array of problems. And not just for climate and sea level change. So unfortunately, the humans may, and artificial intelligence might be the linchpin here, just in the same way that the development of atomic weapons appears to have attracted the attention of non-human intelligences directly. It's very likely that the onset of artificial intelligences will similarly attract that kind of attention, and most likely negative attention. So eventually something will probably intervene in the humans' mad race to replace everything alive with dead objects and mechanisms. And while that doesn't fill me with hope, it might represent an opportunity for our people to be introduced to some of the other intelligences that live in the complexly layered context of time, space, and the solar system. So this is my update from the garden. I'm grateful to those of you who watch and share and like my videos. If you find my content valuable, please consider supporting it on Patreon. I provide the content free for everyone with no advertisements because I think given the kinds of topics that I cover, having them broken up by advertisements would be ironic, hypocritical, and bizarre. Thank you all. Be courageous and beautiful in your lives and ways. Tell me your thoughts. Join in the conversation in comments, or contact me directly if you'd like to have a conversation together. I love to explore the possibilities of our human nature, history, and cognition, as well as the context in which we come to life together. Again, thank you for joining me. Much love. Bye-bye for now.